Well, earlier this week, the Electoral Commission announced that only two political parties, the ANC and the DA, had confirmed receiving donations of over 100,000 rand in the latest reporting cycle. Under the Political Party Funding Act, parties have to tell the IEC who's given them donations over 100,000 rand, but soon they'll also have to give the Commission their audited accounts. In other words, for the first time, we should get a comprehensive picture of how our political parties really fund themselves. Or do we need to be too cynical and ask the question, will we really? Robin Pasensi is a researcher at the organisation My Vote Counts. Robin, good afternoon to you, and thanks for your time. We've seen these announcements. We've had 4 of them so far. Do you believe we're now getting the information that we're supposed to get about how our political parties are funding themselves?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you for having me on the show. I think we do have a clearer picture. I think we are now able to give sort of a longer view now that we've had 4 quarters worth of party funding disclosures. However, what I will say is that we still have the audited financial statements to look forward to that all political parties, whether they are represented or unrepresented, are mandated to produce under the PPFA. And I think that will complete the picture that we now have with all 4 quarterly disclosures.
Robin, I've got to tell you, it's the first time I've ever looked forward to getting audited accounts. How useful is that information going to be? And within all of this, I've got to say, and excuse my cynicism, but are we sure that the political parties will actually comply and be truthful and honest?
Well, I mean, firstly, let me say, yes, I think this is the first time that anybody would be looking forward to any kind of audit. And I do think it is significant. And I'll tell you why. Because the audited financial statements that political parties have to produce are supposed to be a record of all donations received by the political party, whether it reached the threshold amount or not. And that's the significant part. Because actually all we've been seeing in these quarterly disclosures are donations that parties have received over and above 100,000 rand. Now, with the audited financial statements, we should be able to cross-check and see, okay, well, you didn't declare in this quarter or that quarter. What was your earnings during that period? And can we see this reflected in the audited financial statements? And I think you're right, a healthy dose of cynicism is in fact important, because this is now the space where we can ask the hard questions of our political parties, especially because we have media. We can see reports of what we're doing. If we are looking at your audit financial statements and we are not seeing that recompense income for that expenditure, then we need to be asking questions about that.
We know how difficult this is. I mean, we've seen, for example, the ANC has been through a very tough time financially. I mean, a lot of people would resist giving up any kind of financial information about themselves. There's no way they can hide it. They're going to have to produce it in the end.
Absolutely. Look, this is the importance about the PPFA. There is no way for you to hide. And I think what should be the important maxim here is that you are working for the public interest. You are working for voters. So there should be nothing for you to hide, whether you are the political party who is reporting on the donation, or whether it is you as the donor who is giving that money to the political party. If everything's above board, what's a little bit of media exposure? Oh, I have donated here. The importance is that we're working towards accountability and transparency.
I don't advise political parties, and I hope never to have to do that, but if I did, I would suggest that one of them should have a press conference the day before the IEC announces and get it all out in the open myself.
I'm so sorry, Stephen. I think the sound cut out on my end. Would you mind just repeating that
question? Never mind.
I'll
move on. Is the current legislation that we have, is it going to do the job that you wanted to do? You've been one of the organizations pushing for this legislation. Is the legislation strong enough?
MVC has said this before, and we released a statement today on this point. We support the legislation. The legislation is historic. We're one of those organizations who championed it, but we also recognize that it definitely can be strengthened to do the job that we are talking about. And as you mentioned in the statement, we are talking particularly on those threshold amounts. As it's set now, we do believe that a lowering of that will work better towards this kind of accountable space that we think is necessary.
We've seen some people already pushing back. As you say, it's new legislation. The treasurer of the ANC, Paul Mashatile, it was about 6 months ago, I think, he said that the law was too strict, that it was going to be too tough, that maybe it should be weakened. Are you worried that the moment this idea gets into Parliament, all the political parties will work together, it's in their interests to work together to weaken this?
It is a concern, and the concern of political parties working together on this point is definitely a cause for concern for us. And that is why we have been so clear, especially with this last statement, that this is not something that we can allow to happen. Amendments, that is a legitimate process, but if you are going to amend the legislation to essentially gut the threshold amounts, increase it to these really exponentially high figures, then you are cutting away the core of the act. So this is a concern for us, and we are working to find ways in which we can put an end to that, or at least limit the destruction that could cause.
And Robin, the donations that we've seen, there's Oppenheimer money that goes to the Democratic Alliance. No one should really be surprised about that. Money goes through Chancellor House, which is, exists specifically to help support the ANC. It comes from a mining company that goes to the ANC. In a way, no one should be surprised around that either. Has anything surprised you with the information we've seen over the last year?
I think you're right. I think nothing has surprised us in terms of who has donated to what political party. But I think what has been surprising is seeing with each quarterly disclosure just how much political parties like the ANC rely on a small group of large donors. Just off my top of my head, they've had 15 million rand donations, which is the cap that you can receive in a year from a single donor, from organizations like the Batu Batu Trust, United Manganese of Kalahari. These are large figures to depend on just from a small group of people. So I think that has been significant for us. And I think that also strengthens our resolve against not wanting these threshold amounts to be increased.
So we've got the law. We've got organizations like yourself. There are others, but yours is the primary organization driving this. What would really change our politics, perhaps, is if every single voter demanded from their own political party to know how they were funded. I'm talking about changing the culture of our politics, making our political parties, all of them, more accountable.
Absolutely. We are talking about a massive political culture shift. The legislation is important. Obviously, I've said it needs to be strengthened. We can add to it with other pieces of legislation. But what you need with that, you need people to take an interest and say, I don't like this. I, in fact, don't want this. And that's the collective action that we need to shift this. We also need our political parties, our politicians themselves, to say, look, what I'm working for is not self-enrichment, but I am working in the interest of the voter. And that's going to take a lot to shift to that particular space.
Thank you very much indeed. I really do appreciate it. Robin Pasensi is a researcher at the organization My Vote Counts. Really important legislation. Let's obviously keep a very close eye to see how it is going to develop.